I'm going to be taking a look at Status Pro Baseball again. It's a Sports Illustrated game, and it's one that uses the base 8 system. I'm going to be looking at the 1969 season just a little bit. That's a very interesting season because there were 4 expansion teams that came into the major leagues that year. It would be the San Diego Padres, the Montreal Expos in the National League, and then in the American League, they added the Kansas City Royals and the Seattle Pilots. And Seattle Pilots became the Milwaukee Brewers in 1970. So they only played the one season in Seattle. So, of course, I had to rate the cards myself for 1969. I have a set from the second, the market out there of people that produce these cards, but they're not official, right? And, the rules give you a way to do the ratings, and then you have to use some judgment in this. So that's what I did to play this. And I'm going to play the opening day, the very first game of the San Diego Padres, which was against the Houston Astros. But interestingly, the number 1 pick of the expansion draft, which I believe was done in 1968, was by the San Diego Padres. And they picked this fellow right here, Ollie Brown. He was an outfielder. I believe he primarily played right field. You can see he was a decent right fielder, and I have that T5 cannon throwing arm from right field. He was possibly the best outfield arm in 1969. I don't know. I guess you had Roberto Clemente was still playing. So your mileage may vary on that, but Ollie Brown was a power hitter. He's a young guy. I think they got him from the expansion draft from the San Francisco Giants, and he was a power hitter with a plus arm, defensive capabilities, and he's a middle of the lineup hitter, and probably for years this team built itself for the future, not to win in 69 or to be competitive in 69. They also, the opening day starter was this fellow, Dick Selma. And now he had a plus fastball, I believe, and a major league slider for sure, and some other pitchers. And he was durable and, a competitor. So he was a great anchor, especially for a new team. However, they didn't keep this fellow long. He only pitched, I believe, 4 games in 1969. They traded him. But they were able to get a number of other players. For one, they got, to build their team. So, but he was their opening day starter, and believe it or not, he got the win. They won their opening day game. Another fellow that they drafted was Nate Colbert. He was a young first baseman, a power hitter. I don't believe he started the opening day game at first base, but he was used as a pinch hitter. And he had, plus power, and he would become, an all-star player in the future. And his card shows it. He's got a home run on 26 to 33. So he wasn't, an exceptional hitter for batting average, but he had a lot of power. He does strike out a lot, but he has a lot of walks. And one other player I'm going to review here, and I think this is the only guy on the team that made the All-Star game that year. And I think back in the late 60s, each team had to have at least one person on the All-Star team. So this is Chris Cannizzaro. He's a veteran catcher and, a decent defensive catcher, not much of a hitter, but he had a lot of experience. He would have been good for the club. However, Status Pro doesn't have a way to recognize, club dynamics and the value of somebody like this on the club. The other thing is he was very good at calling games. He was very good at handling pitchers. And again, Status Pro doesn't have that. It probably would be a very subjective rating. I think if I was going to introduce that into Status Pro, I probably would adjust the pitcher's PB rating depending on who the catcher was. And whatever their natural ratings are would be based off the main starting catcher. And if I used a backup catcher or a second string catcher, I probably would try to evaluate what his play calling was like and see, and then I would probably make a chart to roll the dice on to see if the pitching would be, remain the same or maybe reduced, the PB number reduced a level for that game based on his handling of the staff. I don't know how I would do it, but that's probably how I would approach it if I wanted to bring that in. Anyway, we're going to go through a quick playthrough of the opening day of the San Diego Padres against the Houston Astros, and I believe this was played in San Diego. So I'm going to be going through the lineups for this game. This is opening day 1969 at San Diego Stadium. First game, I think it was at night, grass field, hosting the Houston Astros. So Houston's leadoff hitter was Jesus Alou, and he was one of three Alou brothers, right? Felipe and I don't know, one other one. This fellow's starting the game in right field. He's an average ball player. He's nothing special, but he is a starting major league player. And then you've got Joe Morgan. This is a 25-year-old Joe Morgan who would eventually become famous with the Cincinnati Reds, of course. Fast base runner, pretty good with the bat as far as contact hitter, good fielder, batting second. Then your third hitter is their center fielder, Norm Miller. This is a young guy, and he's just an average major league player. Third baseman, I think, may have been considered one of the best third basemen in 1969 in the National League, Doug Rader. Power hitter, well, the card doesn't show power because he doesn't have enough home run numbers, but he had some pop. Very good defensive third baseman, veteran player, Doug Rader. Then you've got the first baseman, Kurt Blefary, and, a workman. That's about it. Nothing special. Left field had starting Bob Watson. And the shortstop, excellent fielding, a journeyman player, really, Dennis Menke. And then the catcher, excellent catcher in this era, Johnny Edwards. He was good throwing arm. He called a very good game, commanded the strike zone well, but that's not recognized in this game, although I probably have some thoughts on that sometime. And then pitching, you got Don Wilson. This guy is, at this age, I think he's about 25 here. He was an ace of staff, a number one or number two starter, definitely. I mean, you'll see at the bottom of the card there, he has 34 starts, and his start rating is 18. So this guy had durability. He stayed in the game. Not complete control of the game, but he was a very good fastball and an excellent slider, and he could throw in a curveball. So this guy is, formidable. And so that's the starting lineup there. Now, the team that I'm mostly concerned with is the expansion team, the San Diego Padres. And leading off is an interesting fellow, Rafael Robles. And you'll notice on this card, he played shortstop for only 6 games. In his error rating, E10. I mean, he came up, I believe, straight from single A. He really wasn't ready for the major leagues, and you can tell by this card. Look at those strikeout numbers and out numbers. And he's an E10. Now, this fellow was a defense first player, but in 6 games, he was outmatched at this level. He didn't last very long, but he did start the opening game. Then the second baseman was Roberto Pena. So this guy was in his 30s by this time. He's known as a utility player. He could play a lot of different positions over his career. In this game, he starts at second base, decent hitter, fair contact and, an adequate major leaguer. Then you've got Tony Gonzalez here. I think he is in center field. Tony Gonzalez, decent ball player. Now, this fellow here was the #1 pick of the expansion draft. This is 25-year-old Ollie Brown. Very good, powerful right fielder, power hitter, cannon throwing arm. Now, this is probably the best offensive player on this team, and, he holds his own on defense. And then I think you've got Bill Davis here. This is a 6'7" tall first baseman, but he didn't really hit with the degree of power that he looked like he would. But he was an adequate first baseman. He didn't obviously stay in as the starter because Nate Colbert was on this team, and he would end up emerging as the starter. Then in left field, you have a steady hitter. This is Larry Stahl. Average defensive player, decent hitter, probably a fourth outfielder on most, contending teams, but here he's the starting left fielder. Third baseman, they've got Ed Spezio, definitely a good fielding third baseman, decent hitting, and I believe they traded off-season to get him. They traded one of their expansion draft picks, I think it was Dave Gesty, to get this solid third baseman, Ed Spezio. They also have a catcher here, excellent catcher, Chris Cannizzaro. Definitely could handle a pitching staff and call a game, and he wasn't great with the bat, but incidentally, I think he was on the All-Star team in 1969. And back in this era, I think every team had to have at least one player selected for the All-Star team. So this guy was, a veteran catcher and made the team. And then their starting pitcher was Dick Selma. He didn't stay very long with this club because they got a very good trade offer, which they ended up making. But he did start 3 games and relieved in 1 in April of 1969. So here you have, pitcher batter rating 2.6. It's, so-so, 16 starter rating. The card's not bad. This guy had a very good fastball and an excellent slider. He was working on a curveball, but those first 2 pitches were definitely major league level pitches. And I think in the opening game, and historically, he pitched a 9-inning win. So we'll see if he reproduces that in this game. Anyway, that's a little bit of a look at the opening lineups, and we'll just go through what happened when I played through this game now. So this is April 8th, 1969 at San Diego Stadium, and the Houston Astros are visiting the San Diego Padres for their first game in the history of the San Diego franchise. So tonight on the mound for San Diego is Dick Selma. He's a fairly good pitcher with a live fastball and excellent slider, so he should prove to be quite effective. And the first 3 batters that he's going to face from Houston is Jesus Alou playing right field, Joe Morgan playing second base, and Norm Miller, the center fielder. So leading off is Jesus Alou, and Selma ends up hitting him. So Alou gets to first base. So that doesn't start out very good. Then the second baseman, Joe Morgan, comes up, and he gets an infield hit, and he moves Alou to second base. So you get no outs and men on first and second. And then the center fielder, Norm Miller, comes to bat, and he hits into a fielder's choice, shortstop to second, and this puts Joe Morgan out at second, but Miller is safe at first, and Alou advances to third. Then the third baseman, Doug Rader, comes up, and he grounds out to short, but the runners advance. Then Kurt Blefary, the first baseman, comes up. He walks. And then Bob Watson walks. And finally, Dennis Menke grounds out 6-4. And that ends the inning. But they do get one run. Alou scored, if I reported that correctly. Hopefully I did. So, Selma got out of the inning, but it was a tough start. So now we go to the bottom of the first, and the leadoff hitter is Rafael Robles. He's the starting shortstop, and frankly, this guy probably shouldn't have been in the major leagues at this point. He was a single A player, I believe, that was brought up because they needed a shortstop. So he got the start, and somehow he's leading off. This is a defense first guy, but he only played 6 games with San Diego, so he happens to have an E10 rating at shortstop. So that's not so good. Then the second baseman is Roberto Pena. This guy's a journeyman, and he's playing second base. He brings a little bit of stability to the club. And then the center fielder is Tony Gonzalez, another veteran. And so we'll see how the first inning on the offense goes for San Diego. So the Padres are facing a fairly good number 1 starting pitcher for Houston, Don Wilson. He's a decent pitcher. He's got a fastball slider combo, kind of like Dick Selma, and he's an overpowering, durable pitcher. So Rafael Robles ends up getting a base hit to center field. So this is a great way for this single A prospect to start off. Then Roberto Pena, the second baseman, ends up striking out against Wilson. And then Tony Gonzalez, the center fielder, hits a fly to right field, and Robles, of course, holds up at first base. And then the right fielder, Ollie Brown, came up and hit a double to right field, and Robles got over to third base. But Robles is only a C-rated runner, and even though the right fielder, Jesus Alou, is a T3, which is an average arm, going first to home on a double is a tall order for a C runner, so I didn't do it. So we have runners at second and third, and the first baseman, Bill Davis, comes up to bat. And of course, he struck out. He was overpowered by Don Wilson. So at the end of the first inning, Wilson has 2 strikeouts. And the score is 1-0 in favor of Houston. So we go to the top of the second. So the top of the second, leading off, is the catcher for Houston, Johnny Edwards. And he ends up getting on base due to an error on the shortstop. This is the rookie Rafael Robles. So Edwards is on base. Then the pitcher comes up, Don Wilson. He hits a ground ball to short. It should be a double play, but because he's an A-rated base runner, amazing for a pitcher, right? It's an out, shortstop to second, but Wilson beats out to throw to first, so he's on with a fielder's choice. So there's 1 out, man on first. Then the right fielder, Jesus Alou, hits a fly ball to center field for an out. The runner, of course, holds up. And then Joe Morgan, the second baseman, comes up and he grounds out to first base unassisted, and that ends the top of the second. So the score is still 1-0 Houston, and then we have coming up Larry Stahl of the San Diego Padres in the bottom of the second. So Larry Stahl ends up popping out to second base. Then the third baseman, Ed Spezio, comes up. He ends up getting a wild pitch, but this has no effect as nobody's on. But then he draws the walk. So he goes to first base. Then the catcher, Chris Cannizzaro, comes up to bat, and he grounds into a 6-4-3 double play, which ends the bottom of the second. So the score is still 1-0 Houston. So in the top of the third, you have Norm Miller, the center fielder, coming up. He flies out to right field. Ollie Brown has it there. Then the third baseman, Doug Radar, strikes out. So Selma gets his first strikeout of the game, I think. Then Kurt Blefary, the first baseman, is hit by a pitch. This is the second Houston batter that's been hit today. So he goes to first, and then Bob Watson strikes out. So Selma comes down with that nasty slider and gets Bob Watson, and that ends the top of the third. We go to the bottom of the third, 1-0 Houston. So leading off the bottom of the third is the pitcher for San Diego, Dick Selma, and he hits a single to right field and gets on base. He could be a problem though, because he's an E on base running, so he's about as slow as you can get. Unfortunately, my leadoff hitter is Rafael Robles. He is not a good hitter at all, and I think my best shot, even though I have a terrible runner, is kind of pulling a rabbit out of my hat and doing a hit and run. So that is what I did, and he grounded out to second base, and Selma actually made it to second, even though he's a station-to-station runner. Then the second baseman, Roberto Pena, got up and lined out to third base, where Doug Radar has it. Then Tony Gonzalez, the center fielder, hits a single to center field, and Selma, again being a station-to-station runner, only makes it to third. I didn't send him home, and I decided to let Ollie Brown have a chance to bat with men on first and third, and Ollie Brown ended up grounding out to second, and that ends the third inning. It's still 1-0 Houston. We go to the top of the fourth. So we go to the top of the fourth. It is Selma is pitching to the shortstop, Dennis Menke, then the catcher, Johnny Edwards, and the pitcher, Don Wilson. So Menke grounds to short, but Robles commits his second error, and Menke is safe at first. That leads to the catcher, Johnny Edwards, who flies out to center, and Menke holds up at first base. Then the pitcher, Don Wilson, is decided to sacrifice because he's an AA sacrifice rating, and he grounds catcher to first and effectively moves Menke to second base, which brings us to the top of the order with 2 outs and a man on second. And Jesus Alou, the right fielder, is struck out by Selma. This is Dick Selma's third strikeout of the game, and that ends the top of the fourth. Still 1-0 Houston. We go to the bottom of the fourth. So leading off the bottom of the fourth is Bill Davis, the first baseman for San Diego, and he is struck out by Don Wilson. This is Wilson's third strikeout of the game. And that brings up Larry Stahl, the left fielder, and he is able to draw a walk. Then the third baseman, Ed Spezio, flies out to the shortstop, Dennis Menke, with leaving 2 out with a man on first. Then the catcher, Chris Cannizzaro, also strikes out. And this is the fourth strikeout for Don Wilson. And that brings an end to the fourth inning. Houston is still up 1-0. And we go on to the top of the fifth. So in the fifth, Joe Morgan, the second baseman, leads off against Dick Selma, and he grounds to short for 1 out. Then the center fielder, Norm Miller, hits a double to left field and holds up at second. This brings up the third baseman, Doug Radar, and he strikes out. This is the fourth strikeout now for Dick Selma. So there are 2 down with a man on second. Then the first baseman, Kurt Blefary, hits a double to left, and this scores Norm Miller, making the score 2-0. That brings up Bob Watson, the left fielder, and he flies out to left field, ending the inning. But Houston has extended their lead to 2-0 now. And as we go to the bottom of the fifth, we have the pitcher, Dick Selma, Rafael Robles, and Roberto Pena coming up. So leading off, the bottom of the fifth is Dick Selma, and he hits a fly ball to center field, which is caught by Norm Miller. That's out number one. Then the shortstop, Rafael Robles, comes up to bat, and he grounds out third to first, bringing up Roberto Pena with two out. He flies out to right field, and that's a 1-2-3 inning for Don Wilson. So the score at the end of five is 2-0 Houston. We go to the top of the sixth, I believe bringing up the shortstop, Dennis Menke. So Menke, the shortstop, grounds out in the top of the sixth, 6-3. This is one out, so Johnny Edwards, the catcher, comes up. He draws a walk off Dick Selma, so you have a man on first. Then the pitcher, Don Wilson, attempts to sacrifice, but he ends up fouling out to first base for two outs. Edwards holds the bag at first. And then the top of the order, Jesus Salou, the right fielder, ends up grounding out to first base unassisted, so that ends the top part of the inning. Still, the score is 2-0 Houston. We then go on to the bottom of the sixth with Tony Gonzalez coming up to bat. So Tony Gonzalez ends up grounding out to second base, and then that brings up Ollie Brown, the right fielder. He pops out to the catcher for two outs, and the first baseman, Bill Davis, hits a fly ball to center, which is an out caught by Norm Miller. And that ends the sixth inning. It's 2-0 Houston still, and we've got Joe Morgan coming up for Houston, top of the seventh. So the second baseman, Joe Morgan, leads off, and he hits a double to right field. That brings up Norm Miller, and he strikes out. This is Dick Selma's fifth strikeout today, so there's one out, man on second. Doug Radar, the third baseman, comes up. He hits a triple to center field, and that scores Joe Morgan, making the score 3-0 Houston. This brings up Kurt Blefary, who is playing first base today. The infield is brought in, but Blefary ends up hitting a single to left field, and this scores Radar, making the score 4-0. So San Diego decided that Dick Selma has had enough for today, and we bring in a relief pitcher, Tommy Sisk. He was an innings eater, I think, for this team, and that's what he's going to be doing now. First game of the season. Bob Watson comes up to bat, and he ends up hitting a single to center field, and Blefary goes to second. He's a D-rated runner, and I decided because it's 4-0 just to hold him up at second. Then the shortstop, Dennis Menke, comes up, and he pops out to the catcher. So Canizero puts that one away for two outs. And then Houston's catcher, Johnny Edwards, comes up, and he flies out to second base, ending the two-run inning. But at the end of the top of the seventh, it is 4-0 Houston now. And so this is going to bring up, I believe, Larry Stahl for San Diego in the bottom of the seventh. So Larry Stahl pops out to first base for one out. That brings up Ed Spezio, the third baseman. He hits a fly ball to left field, which is out number two. And then the catcher, Chris Canizero, is struck out by Don Wilson. This is his fifth strikeout of the game for Don Wilson with that fastball slider combination. And that brings an end of the seventh. It is 4-0 Houston. So in the top of the eighth, the Houston pitcher, Don Wilson, is leading off, and he strikes out. That gives Tommy Sisk his first strikeout of the game. This brings up the right fielder, Jesus Salou, who draws a walk. Then Joe Morgan hits a single to center field, and Alou advances to second, but is held up there, so you have men on first and second, with Norm Miller coming up to bat, and Norm Miller grounds out to the shortstop, Robles, who steps on second and throws to first for a double play, ending the Houston's top part of the inning. We go to the bottom of the 8th with the pitcher coming to bat. So the pitcher, Tommy Sisk, is up to bat. I decided to pinch hit for him, so we're going to bring Nate Colbert for his first at bat as a San Diego Padre, and he ends up hitting a single to center field and gets on first. Now I've got Rafael Robles up here. I decided to just take advantage of his ability to hit contact at best, so I hit and run with him. And he ended up getting a single to center field also. And Colbert was able to get to third base. So we got men on first and third for Roberto Pena. And the second baseman ends up popping out to third. And so that's one out, bringing up Tony Gonzalez. And Gonzalez, the center fielder, ends up grounding into a double play, a 6-4-3 double play. That's Menke to Morgan to Blefary. And that ends the 8th inning, just like that, 4-0 Houston still. So we are starting the top of the 9th. I had to bring a pitcher in to replace Colbert, and I brought in the lefty Billy McCool, and we'll see what he can do against Doug Rader, Kurt Blefary, and Bob Watson. So leading off is the third baseman Doug Rader, and he draws a walk off from Billy McCool. So then that brings up the first baseman, Kurt Blefary, and he grounds to the pitcher, but Billy McCool bobbles it, and he is on first, safe. Radar gets to second. So you got men on first and second, and you've got Bob Watson coming to bat. He grounds out to the shortstop, Robles, who can only make the play at first. So Radar gets to third, Blefary gets to second. So you got one out, men on second and third. Dennis Menke, the shortstop, comes up and hits a single to left field. This scores Radar, and Blefary moves to third base. This makes the score now 5-0 Houston in the San Diego Padre home opener. That brings the catcher, Johnny Edwards, up, and he is struck out by Billy McCool for 2 outs, and then the pitcher, Don Wilson, comes up to bat, and he's allowed to hit, and he ends up struck out as well. So that's your third out, and we go to the bottom of the 9th, 5-0 Houston. So we go to the bottom of the 9th, and we got the heart of the order coming up here. The leadoff hitter is Ollie Brown, and he ends up not disappointing and hits a single to left field and gets on first base. That brings up the first baseman, Bill Davis, but he strikes out. So this is number 6 for Don Wilson. 1 out, a man on first. Larry Stahl draws a walk, and Ollie Brown advances to second base, bringing up the third baseman, Ed Spezio. And Spezio ends up lining out to the pitcher. The runners stay put. And then the catcher, Chris Cannizzaro, is up. I decided to pinch hit for him with Saito Gaston, and he ends up grounding out pitcher to first, ending the inning, ending the game, and Houston wins San Diego's home opener 5-0. That's not how it went historically. Anyway, thank you for watching this. Stay tuned if you'd like to see more baseball coverage on my channel, and I hope you have a great day.